Biofield researchers like Beverly Rubrick have shown that the coherence or the integrity, if you will, of the biofield is disrupted by EMF exposure. But I've also met people and have been around people who have such a strong, coherent field as determined, I truly believe, by their heart, right? Essentially, the type of compassion that they're able to hold in their heart. I think it actually acts as its own Faraday cage because that heart emits a magnetic field, right? This really massively powerful magnetic field around the body. And having a magnetic field can also be a shielding effect. So I think that is another contributing factor to why I don't want people to fear it, because when we fear these EMFs, that magnetic field shrinks, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to understand what our exposures might be and how to mitigate them, but know that we are way more empowered than we're led to believe.
Welcome, my friends, to Water is Life, the podcast where we dive into the currents of science, spirit, and innovation to uncover how water and the energies that move through it can restore balance, vitality, and coherence to our lives. Today's guest is a brilliant light in the emerging field of quantum biology, helping people reconnect with the subtle forces that shape our biology far beyond just food and fitness. Carrie Bennettto holds multiple degrees in biology, nutrition, and bodywork, and is now one of the world's leading educators in the field of applied quantum biology. Her journey began as a college athlete, supposedly at peak health, yet plagued by joint pain, insomnia, adrenal fatigue, and brain fog, even with all the right credentials and certifications, a BS in biology, MS in nutrition, personal trainer, massage therapist, breathwork coach. Nothing brought lasting relief. Until she discovered the quantum biology of our water bodies. Now, Carrie's mission is to teach people how to work with their body's quantum blueprint through light, water, electrons, and mitochondrial harmony. As the lead faculty member and board advisor at the Quantum Biology Collective, she helps practitioners and everyday people alike understand how our environment literally informs our biology and how subtle shifts in our light and water hygiene strategies can yield profound results. Whether you're new to the idea that sunlight can regulate your hormones or you've been structuring your water and syncing your circadian rhythm for years, this conversation is packed with insights to help you thrive at the quantum level. So please join me in welcoming the radiant and revolutionary Carrie Bennettto. Carrie Bennettto, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. It was such a joy to get to meet you last year at Tracy's Hydrate Summit in San Diego, and I've been dying to pick your brain ever since. You are one of the most incredible voices in quantum biology. We have such a similar perspective of just the human body and this incredibly weird, wild mystery of a water body and how it interacts with nature and with light. And I know that our audience is just going to eat this up. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Isabel. It was so cool, like such a pleasant surprise to like bump into, be like, oh my gosh, you're here in real life at Tracy's Summit. So it's such a pleasure to then connect in this way as well.
What a joy. And I know a bit about your work. Obviously, we've been following each other for a while and I love everything that you share, but I don't actually know anything about your backstory. How did you first start getting into all of this? What was kind of your initial inspiration to study quantum biology? What's you're clearly so passionate about this. What is the why that drives you in that passion? Your superhero origin story.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I didn't know this field existed, but 15 years ago or so, was when I had my first child and I was pregnant and I was feeling okay. But after my first child was born, I started to just get really debilitating symptoms that people were chalking up to, oh, you're a mom now. Like, this is as good as it gets. I was like, cancel, deflect that. Like, no, this can't be like the way here. And so that really started me on this journey to figure out how to improve my health. And at that point in time, I already had an undergraduate degree in classical biology, like biological mechanisms, so classic human physiology. But then I went to massage therapy school right after college and I really learned more of the Eastern energetic flow aspect of the body. And through those lenses, I was trying to support myself. I also at the time owned a wellness facility, so I was a fitness instructor and breath instructor. I had a lot of different modalities and nothing really moved the needle. And this was, 15 years ago, this was when like paleo blew up, right? And so I thought to myself, I got to learn as much as I can about nutrition. That has to be like my saving grace. And so I went through a master's degree in clinical nutrition and put myself through every, elimination diet, gut health protocol, just, all the different types of supplement regimes I could think of to support my health. And it didn't move the needle enough. And I'm thinking to myself, I am missing something so fundamental about human biology. And I knew it was there. And so one night I was, one of my symptoms was insomnia. So I was up scrolling on my cell phone, and which I don't recommend anymore. And I found a blog post that was talking all about circadian rhythm. And I thought to myself, what? Like, this makes so much sense. Like, and so that my nerd brain was just like deep dive into light. And so I learned everything I could about how light supported human health. And that led me to understand to the connection between light and water. And then light and water led me to consciousness. And that's kind of like where I'm evolving to is, my great, I don't even know if it's ever possible to truly understand consciousness, but that's really where I'm at right now.
That's beautiful. And it is so fundamental. And yet it's the number one thing that is completely missed. I mean, the body we always hear 70% water by volume, sure, but 99.9% water molecularly. And then there's all of this information being exchanged with our environment all the time, and light frequencies and sound frequencies. And our bio water is transducing all of this in such mysterious ways. And I love that you've gone so deep in all of the realms of the spectrum of human health. So you can really speak about it from all these different facets and perspectives, having gotten your master's degree in nutrition already. And you have this very well-rounded approach that I love. And I would love if we can start with based on all of this that you've kind of surmised in your journey so far, let's dive into water as the superconductor of electromagnetism in the body, right? Because the body is an electrical system first, it's biochemical second. So how does this quantum flow of electrons and photons and light frequencies fundamentally change how we see human health overall? And what do you even mean when you say the word quantum in quantum biology? Because that's obviously, that word gets thrown around so much now. A lot of times it's just totally lost its meaning. So how does quantum biology kind of differ from the Newtonian biology that maybe we learned about in school?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? So what I learned about in school was that the body was very mechanistic and very much like a machine, and we can break it down to the sum of its parts. And if we tend to its parts, then eventually that'll affect the whole. And in the quantum aspect of it, we're looking at the body more as an interconnected system. Everything is essentially from at that quantum level, subatomic, really getting down to it. Everything is the same. It's made of the same substance fundamentally, and that substance takes on different forms. And one of those forms is water. And as you alluded to, at that quantum level, where we're looking below the molecular and the chemical level, we can talk about how water is this orchestrator of, conducting electricity and providing energy for the body, and, essentially adjusting everything about cellular function is water's responsibility, which is mind-blowing. In the traditional lens, we look at the macromolecules, we're studying the DNA, but we're not studying the fact that the water is the responsive antenna that allows the DNA to unfold and fold through these things like phase transitions. And so as soon as I began to understand that, it made so much sense to me to be like, oh my gosh, I have to tend to people's water networks in their body. And that, of course, originally led me to light. And that's that photonic energy connection with water. And have you talked to Jerry yet on your podcast?
Not on the podcast. I interviewed him a few years ago for a World Water Day, but yeah, he hasn't been on the podcast yet. I'm excited to have him on.
Well, his work has been life-changing for me, of course, and as just a clinician, because as you know, what he realized and really popularized, that the research about the water in the cell being structured, or the most of the water in the body being structured, has been around for quite some time. But his lab showed that essentially inside of the body, the cells are full of these biological surfaces. And these biological surfaces have this inherent property that allows them to structure and organize the water molecules. So, they're really actually in more of like a gel or honey-like consistency. And when these biological water surfaces structure these water molecules into this gel-like consistency, it gives that water very unique properties. And one of the properties that really moved the needle for me when I was thinking about health through this lens is that water now, in its structured form, is negatively charged.
Friends, let's talk about your eyes, those beautiful orbs of structured water that are the windows to the soul. Did you know the lens of the eye is 99% water? And that structured, coherent water in the eyes is the most important factor for good vision. That water responds to every light frequency it takes in, which means the light that you take in is either hydrating and healing or damaging and dehydrating. As Dolph Zantiga said, light is just a bundle of frequencies that has to be brought in by the right water. Enter blue light blocker glasses, your frontline defense against the dehydrating effects of blue light, screens, artificial light, and circadian disruption. You can find multiple lens options in the directory at waterislife.shop, including interchangeable yellow, orange, and red lenses so you can sync with your natural light rhythms throughout the day and support healthy hormone function, melatonin production, and sleep quality. You can even order them with unique prescription lenses just for you. Because chronic blue light exposure doesn't just strain your eyes, it dehydrates your cells. It suppresses dopamine and prolactin, wrecks mitochondrial signaling, and can actually slow ATP production at the cellular level. And ATP is what helps keep your intracellular fluid perfectly well structured so you have high cellular voltage. This is why your skin gets dry, your vision blurs, you feel foggy, or even anxious after too much screen time or after gym workouts under LED or fluorescent lighting. Light affects water, and artificial light dehydrates. And yes, this shows up in your mitochondria, which are your cell's internal sources of metabolic spring water. Blue light is like a microwave for your cells, frying your metabolism and leading to dry eyes, disrupted sleep, hormonal imbalances, and even faster aging. After all, our cells are batteries made of water, charged by full spectrum light. Dehydrated eyes mean blurry vision, headaches, and more. Quality light supports structured water, clear sight, and optimal cellular signaling. But we're not just stopping there. At waterislife.shop, you'll also find chromotherapy glasses available in every color of the rainbow, because color is frequency, and frequency is information. And water is the receiver, the processor, the amplifier of that information that turns it into biological frequencies for your healing. As Dr. Dinshaw Gadiali taught, each color has a biological impact. For example, green and blue calm the liver, red and violet are stimulating, etc. These are not just visual placebo effects, they're actual vibrational healing, and your intracellular water knows how to decode the language of light and color when you look through colored lenses. Wearing colored lenses is like a gentle daily infusion of light-based nutrients for your entire water-based being. So if you're serious about hydration, circadian biology, or structured water lifestyle, protect your eyes. That should be a non-negotiable. Go to waterislife.shop under the Embody collection in the eyesight section to find blue light blockers, chromotherapy glasses, and prescription-friendly circadian tools that hydrate your eyes, balance your biochemistry, and help you to thrive in a screen-filled world. Because hydration doesn't start with the water you drink. It starts with the light that you see.
Whereas if I were to kind of quote unquote count up all the electrons and protons in a glass of water, likely that would be neutral, right? No charge. And so going back then, tying back to my undergraduate background of, well, I always thought that the negative charge of the cell, which is synonymous with health, right? We need a certain negative charge inside of that cell to be a healthy cell. I always thought it was because we're pumping these ions in and out to maintain that healthy negative charge. Turns out no one ever thought the water contributed to it. Mm-hmm. And so what Jerry's work did that really, did it for me was like, wow, instead of focusing on like what's going on with the ions moving in and out, what if I just focused on helping people maintain this negative charge inside of their cells? And what Jerry showed was that infrared light, specifically the wavelength range that we feel as heat, will help to maintain that charge. And so I started, first for myself, engaging with sunlight, because sunlight contains like approximately 40 to 50% of it, even on cloudy days, is in that infrared spectrum. And so I started thinking to myself, well, I've been indoors all the time. Let me just go outside whenever I can, however I can. And when possible, when the weather's nice, let me soak it up, let me just sunbathe, and all of a sudden, like honestly, within 3 days, it was mind blowing. I started to feel so much better. And so it really led me down that path of helping people to understand how to build their water battery. and through engaging with infrared of all sorts. And certainly sunlight is an option, but that also then takes us through the lens of why in the colder climates, let's say in winter in the northern hemisphere, right, you have such a tradition, especially in northern Europe, of sauna use. It makes so much sense to me now. Why? Number one, why it's used so prolifically. And number two, why now we've got literally studies that have gone over decades showing massive health benefits when you engage in infrared energy practices regularly. Turns out, in my opinion, I'm thinking all of these ways that we're engaging with infrared are ways that we're just maintaining this negative healthy charge inside of the cell. And so that really was the starting point for me when it came to looking at water through the lens of health, because that really connected light to water. And it made some really easy practices to teach people in clinical practice and just observe their health outcomes. And sure enough, wouldn't you know it, I'm certain you know, when you tend to the water network in the body, a lot of really amazing things can happen for health.
Absolutely. I love the way you describe this because you take these complex topics and then you make them so digestible. Like, yeah, our bodies are water batteries charged by sunlight. And we plug our electronics in every day. That makes sense to us, but we don't think about how do we actually plug our bio water into the network of radiant light and energy and electromagnetism that is found in nature everywhere, whether we're grounding on the soil and we get those negative ions and, the Schumann resonance vibrating cymatically through our body water, we're bathing in the sunlight or the moonlight or the starlight, all of which has different frequencies that give us different information that bio water needs. But, especially this infrared is truly something miraculous. And we've got these, trillions and trillions of cells in the body, each of which is 70% water by volume, 99% water molecularly, and they're doing thousands and thousands of tasks every single second. And it's all conducted by water and frequency and the mineral composition of the bio water, which largely determines the conductivity and the deuterium content of the bio water and these different, protium deuterium ratios, which can determine so much of its conductivity and its structure and the ability of the cell to hold that voltage. And so what I find fascinating about all this is like you center the primacy of water and then all of the healing effects flow kind of downstream from there. When you charge the water with light, if it's good high quality water with good mineral charge and good, deuterium ratios, then it's able to hold on to so much light and conduct so much information faster than the speed of light. And this is something that I would love for you to share more about, because how do we bridge this gap between we charge our body water with light and then somehow, and light is supposed to be the fastest speed possible here in the third dimension. So if our bio water is the superconductor that can conduct electricity faster than the speed of light, then how is water actually dipping into another dimension in order to do so? How does water have this trans-dimensional capacity? And how does light, which is the fastest speed possible in this dimension, give water that trans-dimensional capacity? And what does that mean for our consciousness?
Gosh, oh my goodness, this is so awesome. Yeah, there's so many things there, right? Where what I started to view was that structured water, and I know you've dove into this as well. I love your work on this, is that really we are liquid crystalline in nature. And that water, when it's structured and takes on that gel, it's very structured and organized, right? So the molecules are arranged very much crystalline in nature, but they still retain the fluidity of a liquid. And so liquid crystals have been well studied. I mean, this is where I started diving into it, Isabel. It's like, let me see where like liquid crystals are used in technology these days. Because then I start to realize that technology is just a reverse engineering of what's already happening in the human body. And you start to realize that things like when we're in this interconnected liquid crystalline state, this is really truly this interconnected web. This is how everything is, I mean, even more so than our fascia, right? This is like what I would say a fractal of our fascia in terms of this interconnected web that connects everything. So when you have something that's all interconnected, it's the same thing as like you have like a bowl of jello. You touch one thing and it's going to wiggle a little bit more here, but it's felt in the entire bowl instantaneously. That's the same thing. You have an input, let's say on my fingertip of whatever that may be, even just a little bit of pressure, and it can be transduced as an electrical signal instantaneously throughout the body's aware. And it's not just our physical body. We have to look at this then through the lens of our biofield as well, because that is also energy and information and carries energy and information that flows into us, but also then provides essentially an information hub around us that is also continuously being picked up by the water in our bodies. And I believe we have, like this, as Eileen McCusick says, I truly believe we have a barrier condition at the edge of it, which allows for cymatics to be in our field, right? And that cymatic information to be picked up by the water. And essentially, again, because it's all this interconnected liquid crystalline substance, it's everywhere. It's holographic. I mean, that's what we're getting at, is like this holographic nature of reality, of our biofield, of the water. And when you have a hologram, it doesn't matter how much of the hologram it knows, right? You can cut that hologram up as small as you want to, and all of the information is contained in it. And so that's really how I view water, kind of through this lens.
Absolutely. It's so fascinating. It's so exciting. I mean, it's a totally new way of perceiving the world and of living, like this visceral way of kind of interacting with daily existence. When you recognize that we're not limited just to this sheath of this, shell of physical form that we're in, but that our biowater is always in constant communication with this energy field, and this energy field is in constant communication with everything around it. It's really fun how that shifts kind of the sensory perceptions on a daily basis. And I love how you describe it as a hologram. Eileen McCusick is another one of my favorite people. She's incredible. So if our biofield is in constant dialogue with everything around us, how do things like EMFs, for example, impact not only our field, but then our more like discrete 3D biowater as well? Because, I think we've talked about on this podcast before that when you're in the presence of strong man-made non-native EMF fields, it shorts the circuits, the signals at the cell membrane. And it's that hydroelectricity, it's that electrical charge at the cell membrane that determines the osmotic flow of water in and out of the cell. And if it's resonating at the wrong frequency, you can't get hydrating water into the cell, and you can't get, detoxify the used water out of the cell. But then there's also kind of this interesting balance where, yes, being in the presence of non-native fields dehydrates us, but if we're strongly hydrated, we've got strong hydrogen bonds in the biowater, that also acts as a buffer against the fields, that we then have this kind of protection from the degrading effects. So can you explain to us how this works? It seems kind of counterintuitive. It seems like, how is being hydrated protecting you from EMFs, but also EMFs are dehydrating you? How does that actually work?
Friends, you've probably heard me say it 100 times. You may be 70% water volumetrically, but molecularly, you're 99.9% water molecules. But what if your body isn't just made of water? What if your biowater is actually a mirror of the Earth's hydrology in every way? A living, liquid, crystalline temple of interwoven watersheds, just like the watersheds of our Mother Gaia. Now, if that awakens something in you, let me invite you into Internal Oceans, my most advanced course on deep hydration and hydrobiology. This course was created for hardcore health nuts and healthcare practitioners and has been endorsed, promoted, and even syndicated by MDs and naturopathic doctors. Internal Oceans is an apprenticeship in your internal hydrology, where you'll learn how to rebalance your intracellular and extracellular fluids and restore the primordial living waters within through optimal vitality, resilience, and longevity right down to the genetic level. Align your mineral matrix with the Earth's oceans, deplete your body water's deuterium hydrogen, structure your intracellular fluid, boost your mitochondria's ability to produce metabolic water so your body hydrates itself from within, and so much more. We dive deep into quantum biology, fascia, isotopes, voltage, and the sacred systems that link your internal waters to the waters of the earth. It's time to embrace that we are human bodies of water, and to become better stewards of our own inner rivers, lymphatic tides, and cerebrospinal stream. This is about becoming the fountain of living waters that you are designed to be. Water is life. You are water. And this is the science of life itself in one convenient, self-paced, lifetime access course. Join now at waterislife.academy. Your internal oceans are calling, so let's dive in, explore, and enliven them together.
Yeah, sure. And I would say there's two things to look at here. Water, like, so for example, one of the best ways, and I don't like to look at EMFs, and I know you're not describing them this way, but I don't look at them as a means of we have to be fearful of them and shield ourselves and like literally live in a Faraday cage, because that's not actually healthy. When we divorce ourselves from all of the native electromagnetic frequencies that the body relies on. But if I've had very electro hypersensitive clients and they feel amazing when they submerge themselves in water, right? Because that water does act as a natural Faraday cage. Now, when you're in, water in a natural setting, you're also getting Earth's charge. You're also getting all of the information and all, the sunlight energy, all these things. So there could be other reasons to explain it. But I truly believe it does allow them to take a break from having their bodies being exposed to something that their body is currently viewing as harmful. And so there's certain ways that we can do it. So the water does have that natural Faraday-ish quality to it. But I think that's for short-term exposures. Over long-term exposures, and especially exposures that are in more direct contact with the body, those are the ones that I think are absolutely have the potential to disrupt the membrane, like you said, and then basically not allow the water to act as that Faraday cage anymore. And to take that a step further, the mitochondria over time, if you reach a certain threshold of EMF exposure, the mitochondria also, they stop producing water, and they are truly a source of intracellular hydration by the amount of water they make and recycle. And so if they can't do those tasks, then all of a sudden you do get that dehydration inside of the cell. The mitochondria also lose their ability to produce infrared. They naturally run about 10 degrees Celsius warmer than the rest of the cell and produce they're like little heat engines in the cell. And what we already said about infrared, like we were talking about coming from the sun or the sauna, I think that's our endogenous sun, basically, that's able to help us when they're healthy maintain that structured water. So you kind of get this cascading effect that's happening there. And then the last thing about this, like you were talking about with the field, yes, biofield researchers like Beverly Rubrick have shown that the coherence, or the integrity, if you will, of the biofield is disrupted by EMF exposure. But I've also met people and have been around people who have such a strong, coherent field, as determined, I truly believe, by their heart, right? Essentially, the type of compassion that they're able to hold in their heart. I think it actually acts as its own Faraday cage, because that heart emits a magnetic field, right? This really massively powerful magnetic field around the body. And having a magnetic field can also be a shielding effect. So I think that is another contributing factor to why I don't want people to fear it, because when we fear these EMFs, that magnetic field shrinks, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have to understand what our exposures might be and how to mitigate them, but know that we are way more empowered than we're led to believe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much here. There's just so much in that answer that we could go into so many rabbit holes from here, but I really want to touch on the mitochondria, because what you shared about that might be shocking for some people. I don't think a lot of people realize that the mitochondria produces water, and that it produces this infrared energy, and that structures the biowater of the cells, and that it even produces melatonin, but like a completely different type of melatonin than the pituitary gland produces. So can you enlighten us about the mitochondria? What are these quote unquote powerhouses of the cells really doing?
Sure. So the mitochondria, so someone was cute back in the day, and they called the little entities inside of the cells organelles, right? So like a smaller version of an organ, right? And so these little organelles in our cells, we have thousands, if not tens of thousands, up to 1 million mitochondria that are found in an egg cell. So we've got mitochondria packing the cell. And number one, all these mitochondria are biological hydrophilic surfaces that can structure water. But number two, as you said, right, they make water. And that was the forgotten piece that I never learned I learned about it in my undergraduate education. But what I learned about mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell was that mitochondria, they make ATP, and ATP has this high energy bond, and it donates this bond to all these, reactions. And that's what gives the cell energy. And it turns out that's not true. We can talk about what ATP actually does. It is important, but that's not what the true energy of the cell is. And oh, by the way, the mitochondria, they also make water as a byproduct and carbon dioxide as a byproduct. And yes, they make some infrared and heat as a byproduct as well. And it turns out, in my opinion at least, the water, the infrared, and the carbon dioxide are actually more important when you look at cellular health and human physiology than maybe the ATP. And so that little misnomer, like that's just not being put into awareness right now because it is newer information. And so what I started to do when I realized that the mitochondria make water, right? You know, the rabbit hole, when you get into the water rabbit hole, you're like, how can I hydrate myself through what I'm drinking or my movement or my breath work? Or now it's like, okay, what about my mitochondria? How can I better help them hydrate me? Well, there's research out there that shows, unfortunately, that that blue wavelength range of light that's found in LEDs impairs mitochondrial water production. And so now we're getting another layer of potentially being dehydrated without knowing it simply because we have these blue dominant LEDs. And the way that the mitochondria get stimulated again is the same way we would have it in nature, because blue light does come from the sun, but it's always balanced with red and infrared light. And that red and infrared light allows that step where water is made to allow that water to be made more prolifically again. And so instead of being inhibited, you get this balanced production of metabolic water inside of the cell. So that is where things like, yes, light exposure outside, rainy, sunny, cloudy, doesn't matter. You'll always get the right frequencies. But we also then look to things like red light therapy, because those red and near infrared wavelengths of light can really support the mitochondria in their ability to make water for us. And one of the recommendations that I have for people who do have an office job where they're stuck under those LED lights and they don't have the maybe flexibility to go outside as much as they want to, I will have them precondition their body with red light therapy. And that's proving to be beneficial in terms of allowing their mitochondria to withstand the LED lighting environment and still be able to make that metabolic water.
Amazing. So our entire understanding of metabolic water, intracellular fluid, light and bio water, I mean, fascia, all of these networks is flipping on our head every idea that we've had about what hydration really is. And still, you talk to most people and they think that hydration is just drinking more water. So based on your understanding of biowater and its relationship with light and how the mitochondria produce it and how it stays structured and all of this, if you could redefine the word hydration, if you could rewrite the textbooks, rewrite the dictionaries, how would you define actually being hydrated? How does one get hydrated? What are the practices? How do we hydrate our mitochondria? Is that different from how we hydrate our fascia?
Hydration has to be the many ways we optimize the water systems of the body. And we would have to list, like you said, what's happening in the cell, like basically the structured bio water. What can we do? And there are subcategories there. What can we do to improve even things like the hydration of the blood volume? That is key. So the flowing aspect of the water inside of us. And it is not just drinking water. As you perfectly well know, right? Yes, water matters. The water that we drink absolutely matters. But very few people realize that, the water that we drink may not be enough to, even if you're drinking the best, most structured, ennobled, vital water you could possibly be drinking, it just may not be enough to have true hydration. Because once we drink that water, certainly it has to hydrate the blood volume first. And so once that blood volume is hydrated, which a lot of people, it's not histamine, as dehydration and histamine go hand in hand. And I'm seeing a ton of histamine-based symptoms these days, MCAS type symptoms. And so we have to hydrate that blood volume. Once that blood volume is hydrated, then it gets into the interstitial space. That'll hopefully hydrate the lymphatic system there. Once that's hydrated, it, like you said, does the cell membrane have the charge it needs to allow the fresh water in and the used water out? And then what's happening at the level of the mitochondria? And so, all of these pieces are interconnected. And I think if we teach this as a curriculum, it may sound like a lot, but if you literally know how to hydrate your body through things like light and movement and minerals and the water that you drink and supporting your mitochondria, it really is a comprehensive strategy for maintaining total body health. And instead of looking at the body as an organ by organ system that we have to fix, it's like, oh, you have high blood pressure, let's talk about your heart. Oh, you have you got digestive issues, let's look at your small intestine. Oh, your kidneys. These things address the body as one coherent whole. So that's also a beautiful aspect of looking at hydration through this more comprehensive lens, because it's not just us saying, "Oh, we're gonna help you fix that organ right there." It's like, no, we're tending to your entire body through the lens of water.
Absolutely. And like you said earlier, too, what is the state of your heart? And that might be one of the most, if not the most important influence in what affects your biowater. There were Russian researchers that showed that while, of course, water is sensitive to all stimuli, electromagnetic and auditory stimuli and visual stimuli, what it responds to more than anything else is human emotion. And how much more true must that be for the water that we're actually made of? So yeah, you can be drinking the best quality water in the world and getting out in the sunlight. But if you're miserable while you're doing it, can you hold compassion in your heart at the very least for your own misery? So you can move through it. Like, let's not gaslight ourselves to be happy here
Right.
no matter what.
No,
But
no.
there's,
I mean, I think authenticity is huge. I think emotions are very important. But at the same time, my understanding through the lens of water, and I've seen this happen now, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of times just by working with enough people, we address water through the lens of like the physical body, what's happening with water in the physical body in all the different layers. But then once you understand water more deeply, then people start to say, well, I don't want to consume that media anymore, or that, watch that news as much, or I'm not engaging with gossip at the, water station at work anymore. And it's not that people are saying, oh, I'm so much better. It's like, it just doesn't feel good. The body, that intuitive, that antenna, that water antenna starts to get strong enough to say, no, that pulls you a little bit out of coherence. Let's do those things that restore coherence. And the bottom line is, people still emote, but I think their baseline changes in terms of what they return to. And they do return to that state of more compassion, more joy, that type of thing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the exciting things that we're starting to realize about water, which is really just a remembrance, because of course all of our ancient ancestors knew this, is that just as we have a body, mind, and spirit, water also has a body, mind, and spirit. And maybe we only have a body, mind, and spirit because we're made of water, and water has a body, mind, and spirit. And it's like the substrate of all life and all consciousness and all existence in the universe is these, nested holographic fields of different forms of water. And I consider this oceanic presence of the etheric field to be a form of water that, one of my mentors, Jonathan Butts, he said that, the physical form of water is the feminine, and the etheric field, this oceanic field of consciousness, is the masculine, and they're the yin and the yang, and they're inseparable from one another. Just like the heads and tails of a coin are inseparable from one another. And I like to think of it as, the physical water that we're familiar with in the 3D is the body, but the etheric field is really the mind of water. And just as you can't separate our body, mind, and spirit, I think of hydrogen as being the spirit of water that is also transdimensional in nature and kind of mediates this communication between the body and the mind of water. And so we have to start thinking about water beyond just the physicality of H2O and start recognizing that it is always in this dynamic communication with this greater mind that is the collective consciousness that we all share in some way. And I know that you've gone really deep into ether physics, and it's such an exciting and just endlessly fascinating and juicy, not just mental thing to kind of chew on, but once you start feeling it, it's like, it's my favorite thing to hang out in the quantum field. So I've almost gotten addicted to it lately. I spend way too much time in meditation. But tell us more about that field and how it informs matter and how it interacts with light. And do you see there's being a difference between the etheric field and the quantum field? Are they synonymous with one another? Share with us kind of how this works in your paradigm.
Yeah, sure. And I don't know everything about this, but I love your take on it. I resonate with what Jonathan was saying so deeply. I've always viewed water, like you said, as this dimension's fractal of the etheric substance. And that is why communications and all the transmissions that happen, through the field are received by water, right? Because they're just holographic representations, or they're just fractal representations of each other. And what really started to intrigue me when I started studying the ether, to kind of go more towards your yin and yang aspect of it, is Number one, they were both described as fluids, and they're both can be like superfluids, if you will, right? In certain ways on this physical realm, but also the ether is this superfluid that can vortex and it can press and gather energy, right? It can expand and release energy. And so the behavioral dynamics are very much the same. But in terms of the yin and the yang, the ether is described as this luminiferous, this light field, even though we can't see it. So that is much more of a yang energy, whereas the yin and the water, right, that feminine energy. And it perfectly makes sense to me that they engage in this dance back and forth, sharing energy and information. It's also interesting to think that, like, the vortex dynamics aspect of it.
Friends, imagine having access to fresh, living spring water right from your sink. I want to introduce you to my absolute favorite all-in-one water solution, the Spring Aqua Wet 7. It was designed to mimic the geology of the miracle healing spring at Bernadette's Grotto in Lourdes, France. And if you've taken my Navigating the Waters course, then you know the steps to revive dormant water back into spring quality water are to filter, structure, balance, and energize. And this is the only device that does all of the above. Plus, it suffuses the water with therapeutic doses of molecular hydrogen without using electrolysis. This is the filter that I personally use at home, and I'm hooked. It uses no electricity and wastes no water, while removing all the toxic swag you don't want, including chlorine, chloramine, and fluoride. It's like an ecosystem in a box, recreating spring water right from your tap. It's highly antioxidant and bioavailable, hydrating you right down to the cellular and bioenergetic levels. So if you're looking for an all-in-one convenient and top-quality under-sink revitalizer for your tap water or well water, it's got to be the Spring Aqua. Find it at waterislife.shop and use the code WaterIsLife to get a free shower filter along with it.
I love nothing more when I was a kid. I loved nothing more than filling up the bathtub and sitting in it until that little tiny water tornado formed at the bottom and watching it go down and filling it back up and then watching it. I mean, I still do that. And now, I have products from people like Rob over at MEA where you can essentially spin the water in a bottle and see this vortex form. And it's the perfect representation of this ability to gather energy and information and then discharge that energy information, distribute it, gather and distribute. So water can do that on this physical level. The ether is also doing that at the level that we can't necessarily engage with in the same way. But I think the behavioral dynamics are exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And it explains so much about, Veda's work with the autists and so much work about Lynn McTaggart's work and intention, Dean Radin. I mean, all of these people who have been studying consciousness and intention. It's just that water is in direct life, essentially, with this field. They are one. And so that's why you can essentially transmit stuff faster than the speed of light. It's just because it's one substance. Mm-hmm. We're just experiencing a different fractal of it in this dimension.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we have the capacity to experience, I think, every fractal of it because we also exist on that level. We don't just solely exist in our bodies. We also exist at the level of consciousness. And the more we kind of turn off the physical senses and tune more into those extra sensory awarenesses, we can kind of dissolve like a drop into that superfluid ocean and experience ourselves as the wholeness of it, or at least get closer and closer to that. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
And I love the description of it as this, what did you call it? The luminiferous field?
Luminiferous superfluid. Yeah.
Luminiferous. What a word. That's beautiful. So light is another thing that's present in all dimensions in some way, visible and non-visible light spectrum. And then just as we have this beautiful polarity of dance that's always included within one another of the physical and the non-physical waters, we have all these other dances of polarity, like, the light and the darkness. And your work has been so illuminating and enlightening in terms of light, but I know that you also speak about darkness and why darkness is also really important. And it's interesting because this is something that Victor Schauberger spoke about a lot in terms of water and the process of ennobling water, that a lot of people in the water alchemy movement don't necessarily experiment with very much, let's say, that water needs all of these frequencies of light, but water also needs darkness. Water needs the movement of the spirals, but water also needs stillness for that ennoblement process. Just like we need to be awake during the day, we need to sleep at night. And that when water is quiet and in the dark and shielded from other frequencies, that's when she can kind of absorb and transform the information. And it's interesting, she actually does that by the phi ratio. She'll take all of these frequencies, and then when she's resting in the darkness, she'll transform them all by the phi ratio. And I think our cells and our biology is also very similar, that we need the darkness. So can you tell us how does the mitochondria respond to light and darkness, and how can we optimize for the light and the darkness? How does that affect our fields?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is so foundational, I think, for health. And very few of us have what we would call a strong circadian rhythm these days. It's just modern living has made it so that we're under all these artificial lights that are blue dominant. And the wavelength that our eyes perceive and then communicate to our brain is the blue wavelength range of light. And it changes throughout the day when you're outside. So as soon as the sun rises, there's a little bit, then there's more till the sun's at the high point, and then it goes away. And that changing blue that then becomes darkness at night, that 24-hour cycle is how the body tells time. And every organ, I mean, and this was known from traditional Chinese medicine, right? Every organ has this, period where it's more active and period where it's more at rest. And then our bodies as a whole do as well, even our mitochondria. So as these organ systems become more active, the mitochondria actually have the ability to be more active and produce more of that metabolic water, produce more, which is more charge, more vitality, more energy for the cell or the organ system that it's in. And so if we can tell the body what time of day it is, we not only if we're getting outside and kind of minimizing the artificial blue, where that by itself is enhancing the mitochondria. But if all of a sudden we know time of day, we optimize mitochondrial activity in our organ systems. And that also, it can be at nighttime too, right? Because there's that period of darkness is also a phase where different organs, that's where they're most active, especially the organs that are responsible for detoxification and repair. And so in having this period of daylight where we can sync time, followed by a period of darkness, day in and day out, allows the mitochondria and therefore the water in our bodies to be fully vital at the correct time and still at the correct time as well. And that is the balance that we're lacking these days. There's this metabolic confusion happening. And the metabolic confusion is such that those mitochondria are inhibited because they don't know time of day. And we're also not getting the correct darkness signals at night. So they're really, I call it circadian chaos. And when you can restore that light and darkness signaling very quickly, people will start to notice improvements in things like energy, focus, the ability to recover from exercise, digestion, you name it, because the body inherently is just going back to getting the energy and the information that it needs at the correct time of day or night, and it knows what to do with it.
I would love to hear more of those specific stories that you just kind of alluded to a little bit. There's almost nothing that brings me more joy than hearing people's testimonials, hearing actual stories of transformation and healing and the incredible, I hesitate to use the term cure, of course, and, we don't want to make any assumptions, but like, tell me some of the anecdotal things that you've seen, that you've actually witnessed. On the one hand, what can an already generally healthy person expect to experience if they start implementing some of the things that you teach? And then on, the more miraculous, beautiful end of things, what are some transformations that you've gotten to witness?
Yeah, sure. So on the general rule of like just kind of reestablishing a healthy circadian rhythm and therefore impacting the water network in the body, I have a general person will oftentimes notice that their desire to fall asleep happens at the same time as darkness is perceived in their environment. And that changes seasonally. So it might be much later in the summer for the desire to sleep, much earlier in the winter. And that actually brings the correct type of restorative sleep depending on the season. So you'll see changes in like different sleep cycles, the amount of sleep cycles, things like that. So winter truly is a time to repair and heal if we allow it. And so there's that. People will also wake up in the morning. They'll oftentimes wake up without an alarm clock if they start to reestablish this, because their body will naturally start to say, it's approximately, let's say 30 minutes before sunrise. Let's go ahead and get up. Now, if you need to wake up before sunrise or after, I mean, that's fine, right? I'm not anti-alarm clock, but there's this natural syncing that happens. then with that natural syncing, they'll oftentimes start to get a beautiful rush of natural energy in the morning. Because when your body is designed to get that morning light stimulus and those first morning rays, that gives your body a cortisol surge. And cortisol gets a bad rep. It's like supposedly this bad stress hormone. But if we can surge cortisol in response to morning light, I call it the chemical signal in the blood that signals the start of the day. And that's another signal that's vibrating. Right? These chemicals are these vibrations, and these vibrations are informing every cell in the body. Day has started. So thyroid, now is your time to start revving up. Adrenal glands, now you have to rev up when you're going to rev up hormone production in the morning. So as you rev up that hormone production in the morning, yes, you get better energy, but very quickly you also see people who have had issues with, like, let's say menstrual cycle length or PMS, cramping. Cycles will start to sync with the daylight and even cooler with the lunar frequencies. And so that is where you really start to see some improvements in hormone health and hormone balance. And yeah, I mean, I just feel like that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like those are things that can happen very quickly just by doing some key circadian practices. But on the more miraculous level, I've had people who were on disability from being off of work because they were just debilitating fatigue or brain fog or whatever it might be. They just could not get themselves to work and started to engage in these practices. And after 3 days, I had emails saying, I can finally work again. Like, or sometimes it's 3 weeks, but still it's like amazing that these transformations could take place so quickly. I've pretty much seen everything. I want to phrase this correctly. I've seen people's bodies heal themselves by using these types of practices. And I've seen everything, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen cancer, the body heal from cancer, from all sorts of autoimmune conditions. I had one client with 7 diagnosed autoimmune conditions. And yes, it took her a year and a half, but gone. And she's back to work again. She was again bedridden, couldn't do anything. And so there's nothing that the body cannot restore back to homeostasis when it gets the correct signals, the correct information, and the correct energy, which is water, in my opinion.
Even infertility, yes. Even women who are, premenopausal or mid-menopausal, being able to restore their fertility. It's one of the most incredible things.
Years and years. Yeah. Exactly.
It's beautiful. I mean, it really is just, it's nature's medicine. It's God's design. It's God's law. It's just tapping into, what is the original blueprint and how can we align ourselves with that blueprint? That is not about anything exogenous. It's not about the supplements, although of course there are some that can be helpful in the process, balancing leptin and all these different things. But like ultimately, how do we just become a part of nature again? Because we've become so divorced from it and so domesticated in these little, closed off 4 walls that we tend to live in. I'm so thankful that we got to have this conversation today. It's been a joy and a delight, and it's made my afternoon. And we haven't even had a chance yet to dive into fascia and
next time.
I hope so. Yeah, definitely. I know, you've studied Eastern medicine, and there's a lot that I want to pick your brain about, the acupuncture channels and all of these different things and trauma release and how the bio water stores the trauma. Oh, so much juicy goodness.
There's so much there. There's so much there, Isabel. So many stories I could tell you. It's so fun.
Absolutely. Well, in the meantime, before we get a chance to have another conversation again, if the listeners want to get in touch with you, hear what you're up to, reach out to you, where can they find you? What projects are you working on these days? What is the current leading edge of your research? Where is that taking you? And how can people keep their fingers on the pulse of it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that opportunity. So my website is carriebwellness.com. And so there you can join my private community, which is such a fun space I do 2.5 hours of live Q&As every week. We host regular gathering grows where, I'm going to be doing one on sauna therapy, for example, coming up here soon. And so that's a great hub. My free kind of information distribution is Instagram. I love just to put this stuff out there in these small little chunks. So I try to post at least 3 or 4 times a week there. I also have a YouTube channel, Carrie B Wellness as well. So I have regular videos there as well. So those are all different ways that you can engage. If you are interested interested, I also have courses in these different topics. So, for example, I've got my structured water masterclass, right? Things like that, where you can dive deeply into this and then how to help support the body's bio water. I got mitochondrial lessons. I got light and circadian rhythm ones. So they're fun ones to dive into. And yeah, so if you're interested in just hanging out and engaging, that's great. What I currently love though, as you probably have guessed already, is that etheric form of water, if you will, right? The fractal. That's really where I'm diving into. But how can I make that into practical ways that people can engage? Because these days, it's oftentimes people don't think they've got enough time to do something like a meditation practice. So what are the entry steps into starting to engage with water and therefore get us into that more interconnected field? And that's very much through like right-brained activities and things like that as well. So that's really where my passion is at this point.
Well, I just can't thank you enough for being a light and a channel of this wisdom in the world, because it's some of the most important things that humanity needs more than anything else. And your passion for it just shines through, and you're such a clear channel. You express it in such a beautiful, inspiring way. And I'm so grateful for your work, and just keep on doing it, and we'll keep staying in touch about it. And yeah, I love diving in with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to everyone who has listened, thank you so much for your presence. Be well and be hydrated, my friend.
Friends, if you're loving what you're learning on the podcast and you want to dive deeper, check out the courses, webinars, workbooks, and private coaching available at waterislife.academy. These are on-demand, lifetime access programs where we dive into brand new concepts not taught here on the podcast. And if you're ready to optimize your water to be a healthy wellspring of hydration, discover the water alchemy tools that are available at waterislife.shop, and let's connect on Instagram @JenIsabelFriend. I look forward to seeing you there. Stay hydrated and be well.